you all being concerned and interested in this. I've done a lot of these, probably about 100 of them, 110 of these, and they vary in size. Yesterday, I was in Princeton, and they shut it down, actually, the RSVPs. They had 150 people in the house, and they shut it down. So it was a really nice event. And then after this, I think I'm going to Ridgewood. That's where we're headed to. So we'll see how that goes. So our campaign is different. Let me just take a step back and tell you why it's different. It's different in a couple specific ways, and I'm going to outline them for you. But the goal of today is that it's going to be different than other kind of meet and greets. Most of the time when candidates do these sort of things, the way they work is that the candidate will get in front, say a canned 20-minute speech or whatever. We're going to fight Trump, we're going to fight Musk, and then there's a couple, 2 or 3 canned questions. You may not know they're scripted, but they are. And then they go on their way. And I don't want to do it that way. The way we've been doing these things are really, I'll tell you about myself, of course, as a starting place, but the most important thing is that we get to kind of this dialogue and question and answer where it's not scripted. You just raise your hand and you talk about anything you want to talk about, whether it's the federal government, the state government, the local government, whether it's home rule, whether it's the politics of the race, how are you viable, whatever you want. There's nothing off. And the goal of that is really that you leave here, you understand how I think about these things, and maybe you'll say, he said 30 things, and I like 27 of them, and 3 of them I couldn't care for, but I understand that this is how he's thinking about it, and it doesn't feel like it's platitudes. It feels very specific, and he's thinking through how he's going to fix those things. If you leave with that feeling or that thought, I know it's been success, even if you don't agree with me. That's the objective of today. The campaign is different in a couple specific ways. First of all, it's about real clear and deliberate steps, as I said, in how we're going to fix New Jersey. The second thing is that it's really about political change as much as anything. I do believe that part of the affordability conversation in New Jersey is directly related to the fact that you pay a corruption tax. You pay a tax in New Jersey based on the structure of government here, which is very unique. And we've done a lot over the structure of this campaign to really take that head on. And there's a couple parts of that. Number one is I speak about it constantly. I was solely based on the fact that the line and the structure last year, I stood alone on that stuff. But more than that, I believe that primaries are a very healthy thing towards democracy. Choice is a good thing. If you don't believe me, just go back to Kamala and Joe Biden last year. Primaries are a healthy part of democracy, and sometimes we overlook that. In New Jersey, you haven't had primaries for 30 years. Forget about the governor's race. You don't have primaries down ballot because the system has been always that a political boss or county chair selects who the people are for state assembly and senate, and when you walk into the booth, you may think it's a pure democracy, but it's the favored candidates in a column and everybody else in column GHI. And that's the reason why an incumbent hasn't lost in New Jersey in 30 years, okay? It's a crazy thing because the ballot is rigged. And Andy tested that last year with a lawsuit. The ballot was thrown out, but if you listen to the political establishment in Bergen County, in Essex County, in Passaic County, they would tell you that with or without the line, the political machine still holds the cards because all of their candidates won last year. And that's true. They won because Andy ended up running unopposed. Tammy dropped out. And on the bottom part of the ballot, there was very limited opposition. So it's true. The institutional candidates won. We've been on this mission to recalibrate politics in New Jersey. And part of that is primaries. Now, the establishment hates the fact that I talk about that corruption tax, which I'm sure we'll get into in the Q&A after I tell you a little bit about my background. But more than that, they hate the fact that I'm supporting candidates down ballot that are running for office. And the reason that I'm doing that is going back to the fact that choice is good, accountability is good. If you don't believe me, beyond the primary conversation, think back to last year when Trenton changed the open public records laws. They rolled back your access to public records in Trenton, if you remember that. And thousands of people went down to Trenton and said, this is a bad bill, don't do this. Thousands. Nobody that I could think of, maybe 5 people came out and said, this is a good bill. And they passed it in Trenton, and they passed it because your legislature doesn't feel they're accountable to you. They don't feel there's any penalty if they don't listen to you. That's the brutal truth. So we want to change that. So I said a year ago, if I'm running for governor and I'm going to spend $10 million to be on your TV, to be in your Facebook and Instagram, to send you mail, and won't send you as much as Sean Spiller, but I knew I'd send it now. I said to myself, it doesn't cost me anything extra to help people that are well-intentioned, that want to run for office, to put their names on my literature where I can and help promote them. That's the way I looked at it. And so we did this big call. Anybody want to run for office? 150 people applied. And then we set up these committees to screen those candidates in each county. So in Bergen County, I didn't participate because we didn't want to have conflicts of interest where somebody says, I'm choosing somebody. We set up these committees of activists, probably people that you know, to be honest with you, in your communities. And they screened these candidates and they settled on 40 of them. And of the 40, they would just tell me, go invite this person to be part of our ticket, Democrats for Change. Now, I want some of them to introduce themselves because they are here before I tell you about myself, because they are on your ballot and they are maybe equally as important as the gubernatorial race. What happens down ballot there is going to have a huge impact on how Trenton operates. I'm going to turn it over to Damali, who is running, and you know her, but she's a phenomenal candidate, and she's working really hard, and I want to turn it over to her just to introduce herself, tell you a little bit about herself, and then there's two in the back, and then we'll get over to the gubernatorial stuff.
Hello? Okay, perfect. So thank you so much, everyone, for making it out on this rainy day. I know it's super important that you all get a chance to speak with people that you are potentially electing. I think that for far too long, just like Steve said, we've been in a situation where you don't actually know all of the people. You tend to know the people at the top, and maybe your town council, maybe even, like your board of education. And then outside of that, I don't think that people really understand what assembly and the district senators actually do. So just to kind of assume that everyone doesn't know, I'll say that there are 40 districts in the state of New Jersey, and we are currently sitting in District 38. I know that many of you here may not belong to District 38, but District 38 is Glen Rock, Farallon, Paramus, anything from Oradell all the way over to Bergenfield, Little Ferry, Moonachie, Hasbrook Heights, all over. There are 16 different municipalities in District 38. We have other candidates here that are in District 39. We also have county commissioner candidates here, and you'll be able to hear from them as well. But I am Damali Robinson. I am a nurse anesthetist by trade. I have been a nurse anesthetist for about 10 years. I work at Hackensack University Medical Center. I feel like I've been working in the community and adjacent to the community for, probably about 15 years. However, I don't know that I've ever really gotten to tell you about, who I am and some of the things that I believe in. So I moved here in about 2010. I was one of probably the youngest homeowners in Glen Rock. I had the fortunate pleasure that the person that was moving out of their house was getting married, and they were selling at the bottom, and I was able to get in as a nurse into this community in my 20s, and imagine that I was going to live here and raise my family here, and it's such a beautiful town. It's such a beautiful experience to be able to see all of your children grow and know that my children were going to grow in that same manner. One day I happened to be walking around town and I was like, oh, I need to do something more. I need to do, a little bit more for the community. I need to do more for my family. I decided to leave the reserves, which I was already a part of in the Army, and go on active duty and get my doctorate and become a nurse anesthesiologist. I spent 9 years in active duty, and now this is probably my last year in the Army Reserves. I've spent 16 years in the military, serving either locally with units locally, all the way to places in Korea and the Sinai Desert. And getting that kind of experience with my nursing really allowed me to see the lens of healthcare in a variety of settings. We have the ability to work in small community hospitals where they're critical access hospitals where people don't have a lot of access to many staff. They're very tied into the community, but they're also heavily reliant on state and federal funds. So when funds get cut, those are the first places that lose access. I've worked in those hospitals. I've worked in government hospitals. I've worked at West Point most recently. I've seen what happens when you have both government-funded hospitals as well as government-funded education with the DoD schools, and what can happen when you have well-funded, children that have parents that are working and have consistent income. They have food, access to food. They have access to safe environments and roofs over their head, and they tend to perform well in school. And many people might say that New Jersey, of course, is we saw #1 in education, but there are disparities, and we are very fortunate to live in an area where we have a solid school system, as well as the county, but there's definitely ways that we can do more. I don't know that everyone in District 38 might say the same exact thing. So what I am trying to do is work on prioritizing government reform for all of the reasons that Steve Fulop said. We have a situation here where one of the people that was the forefront of the Oprah reform bill and reducing government transparency is one of the seats that's currently the incumbent. And I am running to make change and to make sure that we have much more representative democracy, that we have a situation where you actually know what your assembly people are doing, you know what your district senators are doing, you know how to access them, and not only that, they have quarterly town halls where you're able to come and interact, and I should be able to come to you and tell you what is going on in Trenton. You should be able to come to me and tell me what the effects are of what you see as a result of Trenton. And that there should be no ambiguity about who I am, like who's this person that shows up in your ballot, because I'm showing up on your ballot, but I'm also showing up in your face. And I think that kind of accountability is what people are asking for. They're asking to make sure that we're not beholden to the people that are, lining our pockets for campaign. I think that campaign funding reform needs to happen, as well as, I can go on, and I know that, Steve has amazing policies, and that was one of the things that really attracted me to making sure that I was able to be a part of this campaign. Because what I know about this community is that we're very detail-oriented, we're very focused on, understanding the direction that any of our leaders are going. We want to know, we want to have forecasts, and I think that, Steve is honestly the only candidate that has done that, and I'm supportive of that, and that's the kind of change that I plan to bring to District 38. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to go a little bit out of order, and we have some of the other candidates in the back, but in the interest of time, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then we'll open it up to questions, and then at the end, I'll bring up those candidates. Does that work? Okay, so let me start by telling you that had you told me 20 years ago, we'll go back a little while, that I'd be in Bergen County running for governor. How are you? Hello. There's seats up here if you want. The expensive seats are still available. If you told me 20 years ago, come on, please, I'd be running for governor, I would tell you it was unlikely. And you'd probably say, why is that unlikely? People say that all the time, and I would tell you it's true. And the reason that you could know it's true is because I wasn't registered to vote, and that's the proof. And you would say, well, that's not a good attribute for a person that is looking to run for governor. And I would say that is probably true. But the reason I was not registered to vote was because I come from a family of immigrants. My family's Holocaust survivors. So they immigrated here after most of my family was in Auschwitz. Most of them were murdered there. 35 were taken there, 7 survived, and they immigrated to this country. And those of you that are familiar with the immigrant experience, you would know that when people come to this country, they're very insular. They're not involved in the community. They're not involved in politics. Their really priority is to just build a better life for their kids. That's how my parents looked at it. And they wanted us to be as American as you could imagine. My name is obviously Steve. My older brother passed away with Dan, and my younger brother was Rich. My parents literally kind of looked up, what's the most American names they could find, and that's kind of where they landed. My father had this deli in Newark, and I worked a lot of hours in there, and I say all the time that I know more about the deli business than any gubernatorial candidate in the history of America. And my mom had an immigration services business directly next door, helping people get immigration in Newark. And after college, I got a job at an investment bank, most prestigious investment bank, so you can imagine how my parents thought. Here I am on the American dream, it's 1999, about to really make a lot of money, on a great trajectory. And 9/11 happened, so 2001. And I'm sure every one of you in this room has a 9/11 moment, and that's true. And I'm sure it impacted everyone in some sort of way. For me, it helped redefine what I wanted to do with my life. It forced me to really rethink whether I wanted to be trading stocks. I was literally on the trading floor for Goldman Sachs when the planes hit. You could feel the building shake because we were 2 blocks away. And it forced me to really rethink what I wanted to do. And I went to my managers at Goldman Sachs maybe the next day or 2 days later, and I said I was going to leave and enlist in the Marine Corps. And they thought I was crazy, as you can imagine. They thought it wasn't something that people at Goldman Sachs do. And I thought it was important. And I thought it was really a partial payment for citizenship. I thought it was a debt owed to this country in appreciation of what my family had. And that was the mission I was on. If you told me then I'd be here today, I'd still tell you unlikely. I wasn't registered to vote. But I thought it was important to serve. And that's what I knew. So I went to Paris Island, wanted to be on the enlisted side, spent a bunch of months in boot camp, and then off to Iraq in that first wave of troops. I guess what you guys saw as shock and awe on TV, if you remember that, I was literally there. I crossed the next day and then up to Baghdad. When I came back, the mayor of Jersey City at the time was this guy by the name of Glen. And he was the first African-American mayor in the history of Jersey City. And super popular guy. He was a Marine. And I share that with you because he felt it was really important at the time to recognize anybody that was deployed and then come back, give him a city proclamation. That was what he was trying to do. So somehow he found my name, called me up, invited me to City Hall. It was my first time ever being in a municipal building. Got my city proclamation. We went to his office afterwards. We had an hour conversation. He asked a lot of questions. What was it like in Iraq? What did you see there? Why did you leave? What did your parents think? A lot of questions. And I answered them because people were curious at that point in time about deployment. And I figured, why not help? I was one of the first overseas and one of the first back. I left after that with my proclamation. Never thought I'd be back in City Hall or see that guy again. And that's the way it went. 6 months, I was trying to get my career back in finance, working. I was leaving work one day in lower Manhattan. I get a 201 area code on my phone, a phone call. And at that stage in my life, I would answer an unidentified phone call. So I picked it up. I was curious, and it was the mayor. And which was, today I had perspective on how weird that phone call was. And because I have 3,000 employees that work for me in City Hall, which he had as well. We have 20 people that do constituent services. It was a weird phone call. He picks it up, I pick it up, and hey Steve, how's it going? And we had a little bit of small talk. And then I'm trying to process why this guy's calling me, obviously. And then it dawned on me. I thought I was a smart guy. I said, you know what? I called City Hall to complain about a parking issue. This guy's on the gate. And I said something to him about it. He's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So he says, look, I'm calling because I'd like you to come to City Hall and I'd like to talk to you about something. And so we set a time for 2 days later. And I went to City Hall. It was my second time ever being in a municipal building. And we go into his office, and we sit down, and he starts talking a little bit about the June primary 20 years ago. He says, Steve, you know, this coming June primary is going to be very competitive. I said, okay. He said, Bob Menendez, you've heard of the guy, right? Yeah. He said, Bob Menendez is going to run a whole slate of candidates. He said, Bob Menendez is going to run for Congress, and then some people for county clerk and county surrogate in his line, and then his county committee seats underneath. That's what Cunningham says to me. And then Cunningham says, we're going to run a whole slate of candidates. We're going to run someone for Congress and someone for county clerk and county surrogate and these committee seats underneath. And I said, okay, sounds wonderful. And he says, you know, Steve, people that go far in politics have some consistent attributes to their story. And I said, really? And he goes, yeah. He goes, most of the time they lose before they win. It's true. And he said, most of the time they start when they're young. Is that right? He says, yeah. He says, you can think about it. He says, Bill Clinton lost before he won. George Bush lost before he won presidents. It's just the way it generally works. I said, okay, sounds great. And he says, you know what? I'm going to tell you something, and I don't want you to have an adverse reaction to this. I want you to think about it. And I said, okay. And he said, look, I'd like you to run for Congress against Bob Menendez. And I said to him, God's honest, I said, you got to repeat that for me. And he said it to me again. And I said, look, Mayor, I'm not registered to vote. I'm not involved. It's like, I didn't expect this conversation. It's a strange conversation for me. Let me think about it, okay? And let me process the conversation. And I left. And I stood in front of City Hall, and I called my parents. I called some friends. I told them the story I just told you, almost verbatim. And they all had the same reaction. They all said, are you sure that's what the mayor said to you? And I said, yeah, it is. And so I called him back 2 days later. I registered that morning, called him back 2 days later, and I said I would do it.
Wow.
And the reason I said I would do it was because I know we don't know each other particularly well, but I really have tried to live my life by recognizing that you can't plan everything. And sometimes opportunities present themselves that you don't foresee, and you grow as a person when you put yourself in an uncomfortable area. I really believe that, and my track record speaks to that. And so I really thought at the time I would try this, and I'd tell my grandkids that I had run for Congress. That's how I viewed it at the time. And so for 6 months, he and I campaigned every day together towards the June primary. And those of you that follow New Jersey politics would remember that a week before the election, he had a massive heart attack and he passed away. And it was on the cover of the New York Times because it's not every day that one of the mayors in the 100 largest cities in the country passes away in office, let alone an African-American mayor, because there were very few or less at that time. And so a week later was the election, and needless to say, nowhere on my resume does it say I was a congressman. Now, why do I share that with you? Okay, long story. Why do I share that with you? Those 6 months that we campaigned together were life-changing, very similar to the Marine Corps. And you're going to say, why? And I'm going to tell you that I'm with this guy every day, and I'm a nobody. He's the mayor. And every day there are people coming up to he and I with all these sorts of issues as we're campaigning, local issues and state issues and federal issues. Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? Big things, little things, tons of problems. And I have this front row seat, literally with this guy, that the couple times that I would see him resolve it, because I could see it, I was right there, that he could fix it or get an answer or fix their problem, you could see how it changed that person. You could visibly see it. And I was absolutely amazed with it. And a light bulb went off in my head, and I said, I want to do that with my life. If I ever have the opportunity to do something in public service, I want to do it. And that was the pivot point for me. The following year, I decided to run for city council in Jersey City, and it's a tough place to run outside of that political machine, really tough. And we squeaked out this council seat in the downtown area of Jersey City, and it was a big enough deal and rare enough that the New York Times wrote a huge article about it. And you can imagine, when was the last time you saw the New York Times write an article about one single council person that won a seat? It was a big article. You could Google it. And then I worked hard for 8 years as a council person. I think it did a lot of good things. And in 2013, I announced that I was going to run for mayor of Jersey City. Very much like this race. Very policy-oriented and very, very grassroots-oriented. And when I tell you that in 2013 in that mayor's race, that the entire political establishment was against me, I'm not doing justice to that statement. Of course, you had the entire Jersey City organization against me. You had the entire Hudson County Democratic organization against me. You had every notable person in statewide office got engaged. I mean, Cory Booker cut a commercial against me. Mayor Bloomberg, who was the mayor across, at the time, of New York City, felt the need to help the incumbent out with fundraising, who I was running against, and cut a commercial. It was one of 2 races in the country, that then sitting President Barack Obama directly engaged in. He engaged on behalf of Rahm Emanuel, running for mayor of Chicago, and Jeremiah Healy, running for re-election for mayor of Jersey City. I share that with you because I know a thing or two about this race that I'm in right now, because we won that race. I've been in plenty of situations like this, and I'm the first 3-term elected mayor in 75 years in that city, Jersey City. And it's a tough place to be the mayor of. It's a complicated place. And they keep me there because it has been the single best Renaissance story in New Jersey, if not the country. You could visibly see it without visiting. You could drive past it. But if you are on the ground there, it has been the laboratory of change. I mean, we've been the state leader on every economic policy, on every housing policy, on every affordable housing policy, environmental justice, social justice, criminal justice reform. I mean, most of the things that Phil Murphy talks about today as his biggest accomplishments, the laboratory of change where that happened first was Jersey City when it was difficult. Paid sick leave, I mean, we were the 6th in the country. I had to do so much lifting to get that done. Minimum wage, we were the first in the state of New Jersey. Plastic bags, decriminalization of cannabis, short-term rental, Airbnb. I had to fight them with an $8 million referendum. It was a huge national story because it was the litmus test on what short-term rentals look like in the country and let alone the state. I tell you this stuff because I recognize that we have a track record and there's a unique moment at this point in New Jersey. 2 years ago, I started this campaign for governor, and at the time when I started it, people said it's too early, how are you going to stay relevant, why would you do this? And I said at the time, I'm starting for 2 reasons, really early. The first was to be very substantive on policy, not to talk in these high platitudes. I want to outline in specifics, this is what I will do if given the opportunity. And we've outlined that. I would challenge you to go to my website and go to any of the other Democrat or Republicans and compare. It's night and day. I'll tell you, 20 pages on transportation. This is what I did in Jersey City. This is what I learned along the way, and this is what I know with certainty I can do to fix New Jersey. And the way I would do it was one per month, one part of these policy platforms per month, and roll them out, and we would do these Zoom calls. And I didn't know what I would get. I didn't know who would show up 2 years out on a Zoom call to talk about trains, or to talk about buses, or taxes. We get 400, 500 people on these calls. And I knew I was onto something that if you are honest with people, and you could clarify a clear vision, and they want to understand that there was a route that's different than other candidates. I knew it then. And then the second reason I started early was because I wanted to build a campaign that was based on volunteers, that wasn't based on relying on these political structures, because if you want to change that political structure in New Jersey, that machine political culture that I touched on earlier, that corruption tax, if you want to change it, your starting point cannot be beholden to it. It's physically impossible to have both of that. So if you are going to change it, it takes time to build something that's grassroots. Today, our campaign is different. I mean, we have 1,500 volunteers. It is larger than any other campaign. In every single county, nobody else has that. I mean, our payroll, put that in perspective, our payroll is less than $10,000 a month. Compare that to Josh and Mikey, or $300,000 a month, and Raz is even higher than that. I share that with you because we are mission-driven. It's a totally different campaign. It started off when some of you weren't here yet because you were late. But I said that, look, the reality is that these conversations, I've done over 100 of them. And the reason I know it was 100 because Saturday was the 100th, and I've probably done 9 since then. And these are the most important things because it really speaks to kind of our values in one-on-one conversations. So with that, in the interest of time and making sure that Damali can answer some questions, I just want to open up to questions. There is nothing off limits. I prefer that you push us. You say, this is what I heard. This is why I'm suspect of supporting you. This is why I'm thinking of somebody else. This is what I want to know about because this bothers me. That's the best type of question. So we just clear the air because if you're thinking it, somebody else is thinking it. And that way we can move forward together. So with that, thank you for coming out tonight, and we'll open it up to questions, all right? First hand, go ahead. Yes.
Okay. So one of my questions is related to taxes. I know that a lot of people, that's a really big issue. And one of the things that's related to the taxes in New Jersey specifically is obviously we are paying for people that have retired and they have pensions. So that is a big issue. You know, we still have to pay that. We have an obligation, so I'm just curious on your plans or ideas related to, you know, ways to help reduce taxes, but still include that.
Yeah, so I think there's plenty of things to be critical about with Phil Murphy. I think he's done some things good, right, that deserves credit. I think he's been great on guns, he's been great on women's reproductive rights, I think he's been great on pensions, that he's funded the pension. I would start with the pension that there's one municipality in the state of New Jersey that has its own pension system. It's Jersey City. We pay to the state and to the local. And I've been diligent about paying it, and we've never got rid of the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, because I recognize for retirees that's very important, and I would look to bring that back at the state because it speaks to the affordability issue. The bigger issue around taxes is a couple of things. It's a complicated question, but we're going to talk through it a little bit. You know, first, I do believe inherently the cost of government is high here because you do have that structure that I touched on earlier, that corruption tax, which we're going at. That is a long-term fix, but our campaign on June 10th is the first referendum on that. I think number two is that you do need change at the school funding formula. It hasn't been updated since 2008. It's your biggest driver of property taxes. And in particular, the portion that you pay around special education is very expensive for municipalities and should be covered by the state. Parents would get a better service and it would alleviate some of the taxes. I believe that when you think about some of the rebate programs for seniors, the affordability conversation is really important, but I think that the way New Jersey approaches it today is a little bit misguided with these rebate programs, if I'm being honest about it. It's, I tax somebody, you give me your money, and then I give it back to you as a gift, and you're supposed to say thank you, right? Like, that's the way that works, right?
the reality is that I fundamentally believe that the tax structure, as you change the school funding formula, needs to land in a place where seniors, not that these gimmicky programs, but logically senior citizens that do not have kids in the school should not be paying the portion of the property taxes around school, around the school portion. And I think that when you change the school funding formula, you can contemplate some of that stuff. And then finally, you do need aggregation of municipalities and school districts. There's no question. You have 564 municipalities in the state of New Jersey. What I've realized as being a mayor is you will never get them to move by asking nicely. Okay? You're never going to ask them. You have to have a process to do it where you create leverage for Trenton. And the way that I'm approaching this is different than anybody else because I'm truthfully less focused on the schools today. The reason I'm less focused on the schools is because when we talk about consolidation, you're really talking about the objective of lowering costs, right? I want to lower your property taxes. I'm not looking to be punitive to a municipality. If they could exist and it wasn't an additional cost, who would care, right? So the reality of how I think about this is that you have 4 years in a term, okay? And that there's limited amount that you can do, so you got to pick and choose where can you focus. And between municipalities and school districts, when you start touching school districts, parents get very defensive, and you risk not getting any mileage and traction. The low-hanging fruit is really around the municipalities. And the way that you get the municipalities to the table is by doing the same thing that you do for the school district. Damali, who serves on the Board of Education, if she wants to, yes. If Damali wants to do a capital project, meaning she wants to do something, construction for the schools, the process for that is that it goes to the voters and you all decide in November. It's the same for every municipality. She cannot unilaterally just approve bonding of $20 million. It's different for municipalities. Municipalities just have the city council and then you send it down to the DCA. There's no checks and balances on that. And what we want to do for the smaller municipalities, less than 10,000 people, is change it towards that same sort of referendum like you do at the Board of Education. And the reason I want to do it that way is because inevitably you're going to create failure in the system. Inevitably, the NIMBYs will control that dialogue, and that'll create leverage for Trenton to force shared services. It's the only way that you're going to get shared services if Trenton has leverage to make a municipality do it. So it's more about shared services than elimination of municipalities because the objective is to drive down costs, making it more affordable. Okay? Now that I put everybody to sleep, let's go to question 2. Yes?
So if you were, if you had wound up as governor 7 years ago,
Yes.
what would be the 2 or 3 things that you would have done different than Phil Murphy that you think would have had the biggest long-term effect on the people of the state?
It's a good question. I think Phil Murphy is 2 things that I am not, okay? He's risk averse and conflict averse, okay? And I think those are 2 bad attributes for any sort of executive. It's led to the scenario today where if I was to ask you today, everybody in this room, if I were to tell you over the last 8 years, what is Phil Murphy's biggest accomplishment? Okay? I'm going to tell you, good executives would be synonymous in public service, would be synonymous with some sort of big accomplishment that you could think of. Hear me out, okay? Rudy Giuliani, before he went crazy, he was crying in New York.
Crazy.
True. But synonymous with crime in New York, right? Mayor Bloomberg, right? I mean, when he had this idea of no smoking in bars, remember that? It was a crazy idea at the time, right? How are you going to get everybody to ban that? Today it's commonplace. De Blasio in New York, universal pre-K. It was a crazy idea at the time. Implemented. McGreevy with the Pinelands and the Highlands and insurance reform. Chris Christie, I don't even like Chris Christie, but I'll tell you that Chris Christie pushed that pension reform and property tax toolkit, right? These are things synonymous with executives. If I were to ask you what Phil Murphy's last 8 years are, you'd probably tell me, I don't know what that I'm going to point to on that. And that is a problem, okay? I think that the political culture, he has acquiesced basically to the state senate and the assembly to set the agenda, number 1. Number 2 is I think we could have been better in renewable energy. We wasted the entire 4 years with relates to wind, where Virginia and Rhode Island are already operating on this. I think New Jersey Transit, he's been a total failure on that, to be honest with you. I think that he hasn't set an agenda, and I think that I know I'm different. When people say, I'm talking fast in the interest of time here, but I know that when people say, just by nature of DNA being different, when people say, Jersey City would have had this Renaissance story because it's 3 miles away from New York City. I always respond the same way. I say, Jersey City has been 3 miles from New York City for 250 years, okay? And the reason it's different is because I push. And I think that Phil Murphy doesn't do that enough. So whether it's school consolidation or use desegregation of schools, we obviously know that segregation is an issue in housing and schools in New Jersey. The courts have said it. It's not my opinion, okay? And rather than leaning into it because it's a politically tough issue, he punted it to the courts. Think about the school funding formula. He knows it's an issue. He didn't want to deal with it because it's politically tough. I think that if you are consequential as an executive, you got to be willing to lean into that. And that's in my DNA. I mean, I've had 12
What would be
years.
the thing that you would be remembered for?
Okay, I'll tell you exactly. The most important thing for me will be transportation. Building out a transit system that actually works for South Jersey, which has nothing, and then repairing North Jersey. And I'll tell you how I'll do it, as a matter of fact. And we got 2 questions, okay? It's first, I stand alone on the Turnpike Widening Project. It's the largest infrastructure project in the state of New Jersey. It's $12 billion, and it's a silly project. Going into the Holland Tunnel, 14A, B, and C, you're widening it, you're paying for it, and the goal was to alleviate traffic. That was the initial goal. And if you think about it from a common sense standpoint, it doesn't matter if you put 20 lanes, right? The Holland Tunnel is still 2 lanes. It's the same bottleneck ultimately. So I say all the time, I would cancel it beyond the safety improvements and then reappropriate those dollars to light rail expansion, particularly the Bergen extension of the Hudson-Bergen light rail and the Camden-Gloucester line, which I think is very important to economic development and building out South Jersey. The second part is that the current funding for New Jersey Transit, which Phil Murphy implemented last year, was only for 5 years. It was actually my idea, to be perfectly honest with you. I got credit for that, and they panned it when I first suggested it. But it's a surcharge on large corporations, $10 million plus. They put it for 5 years. It was a mistake and political weakness to only do it for 5 years because you can't bond or capitalize against the 5-year revenue because you need a recurring long-term revenue stream to do that. So why would you bond against it is because you need to upgrade and invest in train stations, bus stations, because if people are going to ride it, they need to feel it's clean, it's safe, people care for that stuff. And that's the investment that you don't have today. So I would change that in perpetuity, first 100 days. And then I would tell you that you have a culture in the bus community where the bus routes are privatized today. Okay, so New Jersey Transit doesn't operate your buses. It's run by a private vendor that they bid it out. And that's a total disconnect between the mission of government, which is mobility, and we lose money on transportation, versus what happens in the private sector where they have to monetize it. So transportation, as sure as I am standing here, I know that we will accomplish a ton with it. And I've been in Jersey City, we have the largest microtransit system in the country. I built it starting in 2020. It's done 2.5 million rides to compete with New Jersey Transit, serving the south side of Jersey City. We're in the ferry business, unfortunately. I'm in the bike share business, unfortunately. I mean, we've done a lot around mobility. It's a passion of mine. I think there's a lot of things we can fix, but that is one of them that I know I will be very, very good on. Yes?
If the administration, the national
Hold on.
oh, sorry.
If the president were to threaten New Jersey financially unless you cooperated more closely with ICE, would you be able to? Would you be able to stand up to that?
It's a good question. Yeah, okay. This is a big differentiator between me and some of the other candidates. So I said earlier in my introduction, I come from a family of immigrants. I shared that. My mother's business was immigration services. When I was elected in 2013, I established an immigration office in City Hall. Today, it's the only nationally accredited immigration office in any municipal building in the country. We've been at the forefront of the refugee resettlement program to New Jersey for both Ukraine and Afghanistan. During 2020, when federal money and state money wouldn't support undocumented immigrants during COVID with grants, we raised private dollars in order to do it. I have a track record on this. I think it's been a total miss by Phil Murphy on how he's acted in the last 6 months. And I think the other candidates that aren't willing to lean into the Immigrant Trust Act is a total miss as well. I think there's a couple things you can do. You need an attorney general that is very aggressive on litigation. I stand alone in that I would keep Matt Plack in there, not because he's my friend. I've never had dinner with the guy in my life. But the reality is that it shouldn't be a political appointee like the other ones are looking for in this climate. I understand the politics of it, but he's been at the forefront of litigation against the federal government. And for our protection, continuity is very important. So that's one. Immigrant Trust Act. Two, I think Phil Murphy and me as governor funding the nonprofits that have seen their resources dried up because of President Trump's rhetoric. Then a lot of them help legal immigrants in New Jersey. We should be funding those. I think that the governor could do things like, most people don't know that one of the biggest revenue items in the DMV, or Motor Vehicle Commission, whatever you call it, is selling data to data brokers. They make a ton of money off that, and that should be ended because there's undocumented people in New Jersey that get driver's license. So you're facilitating that conversation, right? But I think my point is that I have a track record on this. It's different than rhetoric, and I think that the candidates that aren't willing to lean into this conversation, because half of them on the stage will not touch it, okay? Mikey, Josh, and Sweeney, okay? They will lose in November, because if you are willing to sacrifice a community and you're not willing to stand up for vulnerable people, the base of the party will recognize that. And Jack Ciattarelli will be a tough person to beat in November. And if you don't have an energized base and at the same time ability to communicate with independents, you will lose, okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit about how you're going to attract good teachers, keep good teachers, and support teachers that have given their careers to the state, even after Chris Christie decimated all of our benefits?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that, so there's a couple things that we can do. Number one, obviously the pension is a given, right? And the COLA for retirees is a given. The tier system that Christie put in place and the Chapter 78 reforms are problematic. Problematic because you cannot attract teachers into the profession because of how people feel. So those do need to be rolled back, no question about it, and I'm supportive of that. And then the second thing I would tell you about attracting teachers into the profession is that we don't do a good enough job in New Jersey right now of investing in new facilities. The SDA hasn't had a lot of money, School Development Authority hasn't been recapitalized, and the problem with that is that if I told you that I'm hiring you to sit and serve in a school that is 100 years old with no air conditioning in June or April or May even, who would want to do that sign up? You have to be really passionate about it. If you're not investing in facilities that attract people, you're going to have a hard time of attracting people into the profession. So I think there's a couple things. I think there's compensation issues and workplace environment issues that need to change in order to get teachers in there.
And what about school choice vouchers versus?
I'm not a supporter. I'm not a supporter. I'm very clear that, look, I think that Phil Murphy has been good on this, and I would continue his process on this stuff as well. Okay?
I would also mention that the school voucher, the Student Support Act, was put in place by Lisa Swing. So she was the primary sponsor.
Her opposition.
So.
Okay. Yes. I'll repeat the question if you go ahead.
Okay. I'm wondering if you think their criminal justice system in New Jersey is working, and if you think there are problems with it, what would you do to fix them?
Criminal justice system in New Jersey, whether it's working, and whether there's fixes that should happen. I think it's a good question. I don't get that a lot, to be honest with you. I think there's a couple things about that. I think that we don't do a good enough job of, so first of all, let's take a step back, okay? When they did bail reform under Christie, it was a good thing, okay? I don't think anybody should be in jail because they don't have money.
Agreed.
I don't think that, and I see this in Jersey City, that there is a revolving door of some of the same offenders because of how we process them, that we don't process the repeat offenders in a list that's expedited versus the people that are just out and bail reform. And I say that to you because the people that are constantly doing the same thing again and again and are taking advantage of the bail reform system is a problem. We see that in urban areas and suburban areas. I think that needs to be tweaked a little bit. I think the fact that Phil Murphy hasn't gotten enough judges through the system is very problematic on criminal justice as well. I think if I was talking about criminal justice broadly speaking, I think you need some police reform. I think you need a CCRB, which is a police review board with accountability and subpoena powers to hold police accountable. I think it's very important. I've been very outspoken on that. And I think New Jersey has a unique thing where you have a Chief's Bill of Rights and a police officer's Bill of Rights, which basically protect police officers from citizens, from civilians, gives them added protection. And I don't think those things are healthy ultimately. So I think how we look at that needs to change. Youth prisons, I'm obviously not supportive of. Private prisons, not supportive of. But that's broadly kind of how I think about that stuff.
Great answer, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Don't get that a lot, actually. Yes, in the back.
Okay, my question is regarding the education. As
Yes.
a teacher,
A lot of teachers here.
As a teacher, I see that, we are losing the best teachers.
Yes.
First of all, because our salaries are very low. They are cities that are carrying our benefits as well. So, and also we are, it's a lot of people, like a lot of coworkers that I have that we do our job because of passion, not because of money.
Yes.
So I want to know what is your concern regarding the future of the state, our kids.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what she said. She asked the same question around Chapter 78, tier system, compensation. I agree with you. Workplace environment. She just touched on that. It's the same thing. I agree with you that you got to change the compensation structure in order to attract people on that. Okay.
About our kids. I'm one of the teachers that do my job because of passion.
Yes.
But how about our kids? There's been a lot of parents that are deciding to do homeschooling instead of with the kids, like sending the kids to school. So what happened to the other kids that they have the opportunity to be homeschooling? What did you consider regarding our education and also not only for the kids, but the young kids, young adults, like kids that graduate high school and they don't have the economical situation to go to college, something like that.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that there has to be a real conversation in New Jersey, to be truthful, about when you talk about higher education and what we're training people for. Let me take a step back, okay? The higher education in New Jersey, those of you that are involved in that or about to send your kids to that, it is fundamentally broken. I had a volunteer tell me the other day that her kids, who I've known because they were a volunteer 10 years ago, are applying to college, and that she said that Rutgers was $40,000 for in-state tuition. And I couldn't believe that to be true. And so I Googled it afterwards, and it is true. And if that tells you that's anything, it is that we are misguided on the higher education. Not only because of the cost, because we've gone into this place of concentrating on sports instead of academics and not investing properly, but there's also how the state funds the program. So you have a thing called the tuition assistance grants in New Jersey, which is for lower income families. But the way it's used, it's $500 million. It's a lot of money. And the way that it works in New Jersey is that it subsidizes the child based on the tuition of the school. And that what that does is it gives a perverse incentive for the tuition of the university to be raised every year because it's subsidized by the state regardless of the student's income. That needs to change. You need some consolidation in the space. And I think there's a reality in the conversation that are we training kids for jobs that are going to exist in 5, 10, 15 years? I'm going to go off a little bit and say that if you think about what Donald Trump, when he won in 2016, okay, he was able to tap into this anger in middle America that was percolating, and he saw it. And the reason that they were mad for a lot of reasons, but if you go back to the beginning of their anger, I'd make the argument that it goes back to Bill Clinton and NAFTA, that when they signed that North American Free Trade Agreement and jobs went to Mexico and Canada and then gradually overseas, it started this anger and resentment about job displacement. I share that with you because 20 years later, in 2016, it still manifested itself in a vote where these people are still so angry because they were never able to be retrained their jobs. Now, why do I share that with you? I share that with you because the changes because of artificial intelligence that will happen in the next 5 years will make NAFTA look like nothing, okay? And so we're not thinking from a leadership standpoint about how do you train people for the next century. Because the reality of the conversation is that, think about it, accountants, not going to be relevant, lawyers, not going to be relevant, paralegals, not going to be relevant. This is gradually happening faster than you can ever imagine. And so we don't think about that, about what we're training these kids for. And I think that really rethinking high school is really important to the conversation, beyond just the funding formula. I think you really need to think about how are we preparing people, because I don't think that conversation is happening at all in Trenton. Okay, what else are we doing? Yes?
Speaking of the higher education, about our state university Rutgers. So having 2 kids in the high school system, I have a feeling, I have seen, there is some kind of stigma that New Jersey kids, it's not really willing to go to Rutgers.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to, know if you have any plan.
I'm going to repeat it. I'll repeat the question for you.
If you have any plan or agenda to make this Rutgers as a flagship universities
Yeah.
like UCs or UVA or UMich?
Her question is about, she has two kids that are in high school about to go to college, and neither of them really thinks that Rutgers
Not my kids.
or not
From other.
hold the prestige or allure that it should, and how do you change that? And I think it doesn't happen overnight. I think it happens with changing. Look, the reality is that they have made a huge commitment around football. That's the truth. Okay,
And
it's misguided. It's misguided because
very misguided. Because they're a business school and they're engineering schools. They have very good programs.
Yes, I agree.
Why
I agree.
they're not appreciated?
It's recalibrating that board is really how that happens. Okay, what else do we want to talk? Yes.
The most recent budget proposals that I'm seeing coming out of Washington may involve significant cuts to Medicaid.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how that would impact New Jersey and particularly balancing the needs of a very diverse state from north to south.
Yeah, so her question is about Medicaid cuts coming from Washington and how we would balance those needs north and south and really think through it. It's a differentiator between me and everybody else. What I say, okay, and what I will do is leverage the state surplus to offset some of those losses. I'm going to talk you through that for a second. So everybody else has said these kind of press releases that we're going to, we can't believe President Trump is going to do this, it's terrible, we're going to fight him. That's pretty much the rhetoric, right? And then it begs the question about how, right? So of course I think keeping an attorney general and litigation is important from the legal standpoint. But in the near term, Phil Murphy has raised the surplus from $500 million when Chris Christie left to a little bit more than $6 billion now. And if you, the purpose of a surplus is really a rainy day fund. And this is kind of the moment in time where you have people that are extremely vulnerable and relying on Medicaid or school funding that you need to offset some of those losses until hopefully in 2026 we could win back the House. You got to think of it in that mentality. And even if it costs you a credit rating downgrade, in reality from the state, you need to weigh that out with your most vulnerable communities. Look, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say that there isn't a person in this room that goes to bed at night and says, thank God the state of New Jersey has a credit rating of AAA. I mean, right? So, I look at it as the surplus is a key tool to offsetting some of these things. And then the second thing I would tell you is that Damali and the other candidates here play a big part in this, the assembly candidates, because objectively speaking, you have $20 billion at risk. It's not going to all be gone, but that's what's at risk, okay? So in Jersey City, right, we have $70 million out of our $800 million budget. That's at risk from the federal government. And so what we've started to do, and we're very clear with the public, is we've made lists and we try to be clear what's at risk and the choices we're going to have to make, because it's going to be choices. And it's not going to be great choices, but it's going to be choices. And so like in Jersey City, for example, you have Meals on Wheels. We're responsible for it. It's a federal program that serves lunches to seniors, okay, and that rely on that food. And we do 250,000 meals a year. Jersey City is responsible for our senior population. And so that's a federal program, at risk. I don't know if it'll be cut, but at risk. And then you have environmental programs, which I'm passionate about, which are also at risk. You weigh those out, and obviously the senior program is more important than the environmental program. I share that about Damali because your state assembly people, going full circle to what I said earlier, your state assembly people in this moment in time should be doing town halls every single month, communicating with you that this is what's going to happen with the state budget and this is what's at risk. And I will tell you that there isn't one, not one, in the state of New Jersey that is doing that. Out of 80, there isn't one that is regularly doing that. And you should hold them accountable for that because it's wrong. Because they should feel that they need to come in front of you and say, look, this is what the funding is, and these are the choices that I'm making, and I want to hear from you what you think is important, so I'm going to go fight in this moment. It's not happening now, but that's how I would approach it. Surplus and offsetting some of those things.
I spent 2 days last week.
Oh, yes, we had this conversation.
I spent 2 days last week sitting
Is
in
it
the
something I said?
state annex.
I'm kidding around, I'm kidding around.
Yes.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
No, I really appreciate what you're saying. But I did spend two days last week as a board member of an agency here in Bergen County, whose life will be shot because of Trump and the cuts that have come out of there. And this is for elderly and disabled adults. We will be cut almost 60% between what our funding is from the state and from the federal government because of their ridiculousness and their threats and their bullying. So our assembly right now is not responding to that. They're just sitting there taking this pamphlet,
Yes.
okay, and saying, we'll just wipe you out, thank you very much. And that's exactly what's happening, and I swear to God, I sat there for 2 days on my butt, and I was bored, and my back hurt, and I thought I was gonna fall asleep. But that's what's happening right now until we go after our assembly people who are voting on this budget before June 15th. June 15th.
June 10th.
June 10th, oh, they moved it up. Okay, last week was
June 10th is the election. That holds people accountable.
Oh,
All right, let
yeah.
me just say something real quick. I'm going to turn it back over to Damali because I have one other stop and I have to be there at 7:45 because we're at the end of the campaign over here. I tell you in earnest, I have a 6-year-old and 4-year-old and 1-year-old at home, and I would stay here all night if you'd have me for obvious reasons. But I first have another thing to go to. But I do want to say one thing real quick before I turn over to Damali to just continue, is that the election on June 10th is a referendum on process as much as it is for governorship. I want you to kind of think through a couple things about this election which are different, okay? I want you to first recognize the fact that where our campaign is different, every other candidate, every other one has created a fallback position. Every other one has created a position where they could have a political title even if they don't lose the governor's race. And that should tell you about what they believe about the mission of the governor and what they believe about political status. Think about it. Mikey and Josh, both 6 months ago, asked you for money, asked you to campaign for them. They said, I want to be the front line against Donald Trump. The House of Representatives is the front line against Donald Trump. I share that with you because the day that they won, 1 week later, they both declared, which should tell you something. Our campaign, I could run for mayor of Jersey City again, and I chose not to because all of my chips are in the middle, all of it with regards to reform and change for the state of New Jersey, because I believe this to be true. I believe I'm on the right side of this, and if it doesn't work, I'm okay with that, but I'm running a race that's not about political status, it's about changing New Jersey, and I'm level with people, whether it's congestion pricing or taxes. I tell them this is what I believe in a complicated situation. I want to tell you also that there's 6 of us running, and not all 6 of us can win. Not all 6 of us can win. And I'm going to tell you that if I ask you why Kamala lost, why did Kamala lose in November, you're all going to have 50, 60 different answers. There are going to be some consistent. Sexism, true. Racism, true. Short runway to organize, true. At the core of it is another issue. It's because Kamala couldn't articulate a different vision than Joe Biden had for the United States of America. And she was all over the map on key issues, whether it was healthcare, single payer, couldn't say that with conviction in every room that she was in, fracking, saying different things. Middle East, she lost the Jewish community and the Muslim community because neither wanted to believe her. And I share that with you because you go back to this immigrant conversation, or you go back to the transgender conversation. You have candidates that are so close to the middle because they are scared, and Jack Ciattarelli will be a tough candidate to beat. I'm telling you that if you are not willing to say that I'm not willing to sacrifice anybody in my constituency for politics, you will lose. And I'm telling you those moderate candidates are dangerous in that situation because of their position around this. I'm going to tell you something else about them, okay? Because people asked me last night in Princeton, it was 150 people, and they said, tell me why you're going to be more competitive than Mikey, because it's you two that I'm concerned with. And I'm going to tell you. I said with unequivocal, if she is the nominee, she will lose. I'm going to hold, you can hold me to that. I'm going to tell you why. You're going to say why. Okay. Well, look, Jack Ciattarelli is going to say one thing. He's going to say one thing repeatedly about the Democratic nominee. One thing. What's that thing? He's going to say this person is 4 more years of Phil Murphy. And I tell you that in a Democratic room, that's okay to say. In an independent room and a Republican room, it is not a good thing to say. He's going to say, you like your energy bill? 4 more years of Phil Murphy. You like your taxes? 4 more years of Phil Murphy. You like your schools? 4 more years of Phil Murphy. And if you are coming with the same Democratic establishment, the same consultants, the same machine, the same inability to communicate to independents and Republicans, your starting point in the conversation defending 4 and 8 years of Phil Murphy, you will never get out of the gates. It will be impossible. The difference that I'm telling you is because of the lane that I'm in,
because of the fact that I'm running a campaign that I acknowledge the system is broken. The Democratic Party in the state of New Jersey is broken because you have political people that have monetized the system for their self-interest. The starting point for me is different. I'm not defending them because I'm saying it is wrong, and they don't like the fact that I'm saying that it's wrong. It's a different starting point that can move independence. One other thing. We all get invited to Republican and independent rooms. Chambers of Commerce, there's only one person, me, that go into those conservative talk show, conservative radio show, and I say the same thing about the transgender community, about the immigrant community, about the LGBTQ community, because I know I can move people when I speak to them in a way about why is that a litmus test for you? Why are you asking that in this sort of way because you don't think of it in this sort of way? It's an important thing because you cannot sacrifice the base and at the same time not be able to move independence. And a lot of those people can't do that. I'm just going to close with one thought here. I want you to think about this election broadly. Everybody has endorsements. Everybody. Okay? And endorsements are different. A lot of them are garbage. Okay? A lot of them don't mean anything. And a lot of them, because of this web that we weave, somebody knows somebody. I would point to two aspects to the endorsements that should mean something, hopefully to you, that's a little different. There's one endorsement that is not tainted. That has nothing to do with who works for who or whatever, and that's the College Democrats of America and the College Democrats of New Jersey. We all competed for it. They're with me. They endorsed me. Why? Because I was able to articulate a vision that they believe is in their best interest. And that's important because they don't work for anybody. They're not biased. All they're thinking about is their own selfish interest, which is great. And that should tell you because you need those people involved in November to believe, otherwise we're not going to win. And the second thing I would tell you is that not all endorsements are the same. I'll give you an example. In Bergen County, you want to know how it works, is that your chairman says, we are supporting this one person, okay? And then he goes to all the council people and the mayors and says, we're supporting this person, you should support this person, and would you like to add your name to the list? And most people are conflict averse, so they say, sure, add my name to the list. And that's the way that goes. And then the candidate goes and says, look, I got 200 names on this. The assembly people say, look, I got 200 names on this. Look at all the support I have. It doesn't mean anything. When somebody says that they're siding with me, okay, that they're going public and saying this is the guy, it's different because they're knowingly putting themselves in an uncomfortable place. They're knowingly going to a place where the chairman is going to call them and say, why are you with that guy? The governor sometimes calls people and says, why are you with that guy? And that should tell you something because they're putting themselves in a position because they believe that I'm right for the job. It's totally different. Shelley Brindle, use her as an example. She's the mayor of Westfield. She's a phenomenal mayor, a two-term mayor. Prior to being the mayor, she had a C-suite executive position at HBO, the first woman in the C-suite with a global responsibility. I share that with you because Shelley Brindle would tell you if she was sitting here, she would say, you know what, when I got into that C-suite, and it was all men around me, the thing that was most important to me was elevating other women. And I did that my entire career, making sure that I moved other women forward. And I share that with you because that's Shelley Brindle's history. And when Shelley Brindle says, I understand the race for governor, and the best person to be the governor of the state of New Jersey is Steve Fulop, you should listen to her because it's not consistent with what she's done in the past. She's telling it to you because she believes it to be true, and it's an uncomfortable path for her. Dahlia Vertrees, African-American mayor of Hillside, woman mayor of Hillside. She'll be the first one to tell you, phenomenal mayor. She'll say, I get it, the mayor of Newark's running. I get it, the congresswoman from Essex is running. I understand all that, and I'm going to tell you the best person is the mayor of Jersey City. We have so many of those people. Dahlia goes into an African-American community every single day, and when people say, why are you with that guy? She'll go through a whole list of things. And I share that with you because it's not the easy route for her to go. The easy route is for her to say, you know what, I'm going with so-and-so with the establishment, and that is what it is. June 10th is a big test. It's a big test on the politics in New Jersey. It's a big test for the country because everybody's watching and not everybody can win in November. So please consider that. Dahlia, the team, Damali, Andrew, they're going to answer some more questions. But when you leave here, please consider taking the lawn sign. The biggest validator of anything moving forward is you. It's not commercials. It's not digital ads. It's not paper in your mailbox. It's you. A lawn sign prompting the conversation with your neighbor. It's you calling your neighbor saying he made some sense in what he said and that sounded okay. That is the thing that changes people. And it's literally hand-to-hand combat. This thing is going to be from top to bottom. 25% for the winner, 15% for the last person. Everybody's going to be within 10%. So thank you for coming out today. I really
doing a little bit of shuffling around. So thank you so much. I really hope that this opportunity was able to resonate with you. I'm sorry. Is it better? Okay. I really hope that this opportunity was able to resonate with you. I think it's very, very, very rare for us to be able to have a gubernatorial candidate in our community that's able to freely answer some of our questions. And this is a very important year, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, and exercising your right to vote on June 10th and making sure that you are as well informed as possible when you're making your decision. So hopefully, today is one step closer to that for you. I would also like to give you the opportunity to hear from some other candidates that are running, because not everybody that is here today is living in District 38. So I think it's really important for us to be able to spread and network and show you that when we're talking about the opportunities of making change in Bergen County and looking at ways to improve access to grants, improve access to light rail for the Bergen light rail in this area, we need to be able to work across the lines of the district and advocate for our areas. And I definitely believe that I have that in my partners that are here. So I'd like to...
Thank you, everyone. Ooh, I'm Mike's a little. So Steve is a tough act to follow. I've known Steve for over 15 years now, so it's we'll try our best to compete with his knowledge on state policy and answer your questions as best as possible. So David and I, we haven't done 109. This is probably like our 24th meet and greet. Because like Steve, we've been only doing this since mid-December, but we believe it's important for us to get in front of voters, because it's not right for any elected official or someone, a candidate for office, to ask for your vote if you don't know who we are. And Steve talks about the party line and how it was for the state of New Jersey forever, and now it's changed. So we're candidates that are trying to give voters the opportunity to actually meet us. You're not just seeing our name on a ballot for the first time, or a piece of mail in your mailbox, or maybe our name's on a lawn sign and you haven't met us and you have no idea who we are. So my name's Andrew LaBruno, as my name tag nicely says. I'm a former Dumont mayor. I was a councilman before I was a mayor. I am a Jersey City police sergeant. I've been in law enforcement for over 20 years. I was a union president in Jersey City on the police side as well. I'm a husband, a father of two. My son Jack is 15. He goes to Bergen County Tech in Teterboro. And my daughter Ava is 10. She just turned 10. I keep saying 9. She would hurt me very, very badly if she was in the room right now. She goes to Dumont Public School System. I'm also the founder of the Dumont Community Group. It's a 501c3 nonprofit in Dumont. So public service has always been very personal to me. At the age of 16, my mother passed away. It was a very tragic time for my family, especially for me. It's odd to hear someone say at 16, your mom was your best friend, but she was. I really had nothing. We never had any secrets from each other. We spoke about everything. So at that age, losing a mother especially, it kind of changes your trajectory in life. I started college at NJCU. My father was a single father, so at the age of 19, I ended up taking a job in the Jersey City Police Department as a civilian dispatcher to help out at home, help raise my brother. And then I started kind of understanding public safety a little bit more. At 19, I was like, why do I really want to work for the police department? But I needed a job, so I took it. And about a year to that day, as Steve says, everybody has a 9/11 story. My 9/11 story, I was working as a dispatcher, and we were sending units to New York City to help with everything that was going on there. And that day, I knew. I wanted to be someone being able to go and help, be able to go after those buildings, go through that rubble, and help the New York City police officers out. A couple years later, I became a police officer. I rose to the ranks there. I was a patrolman. I worked in plainclothes units. I had an administrative role that was heavily involved in community policing. I was then promoted to detective and ultimately sergeant, where I serve today in the Office of Emergency Management. But I'd like to talk about that community when I was working with the community police, that role there. I just saw these organizations, these nonprofit organizations, doing amazing things for the city and the different neighborhoods that we were working with in the Heights. And I started asking them, like, you know, how do you do this? Because I want to do this in my town. I felt like our town, there was not a lot going on at the time. So they walked me through the process, and I ended up being the founder of the Dumont Community Group. We did the Dumont 5K, movies in the park, townwide garage sale. We fundraise for families in need. But when I was establishing that organization, there was a lot of bureaucratic red tape being pushed from the mayor and council at the time, and I couldn't understand why. I was a young dad, my son was young, we moved into town a couple of years ago, and I just wanted to help, you know, I want to make my community better. So a friend of mine, he said, listen, he was involved in politics there, he goes, maybe you want to run for council? I'm like, I'm a cop, I don't really know much about politics. I'm like, you know, I really don't want to do that. He goes, well, you want to do things for the community, which is a good thing, and this might be a better way to get those things done. So I ran, we won, and I realized why they didn't want me to run, because they were afraid to lose their seats, but I had no interest in running, so they should have just probably helped me run those events, and I wouldn't be standing with all you nice people on a rainy, you know, night in Glen Rock. But so be it, and we did those events, we did a great job there. 2 years later, I ran for mayor. We won by a big margin, had independents and Republicans vote for me and my team. We ended up taking a full Democratic slate at the time, which was great for us. We thought we were going to get a lot of work done. 3 months later, COVID happened. And I know we don't like to talk about COVID, but we all understand it's a very difficult time. But regardless, we worked really hard, made a lot of hard decisions, tough fights we took on. We raised over $2 million in grants in town. We did 20 road projects in that short period of time. We did 2 big park projects, revitalized these 2 parks that were just dilapidated. We ended up revitalizing our Dumont girls softball area so they can actually have nice fields to play on. We finished our Borough Hall project, which was kicked down the road 2 administrations. We finally got that done. And we just did a really bang-up job. I believe so. If you ask the Republicans today, they don't call Republicans in Dumont. They're not going to say good things about me. If you call the Democrats, they'll probably have a lot of good things to say about me. But I bring this back to why I'm running now. I truly believe having executive experience as a mayor, as a council person, having public safety experience for the past 20 years is something that we need down in Trenton. I can tell you when I was a mayor and a council person, 43 years we've had Republican leadership in 39. The only time I would hear from those assembly people is when they had a complaint, an email complaint from a Republican constituent that wanted to complain about me. They didn't help me with grants. They didn't help me about what the state mandates fundings were, what state mandates were, and how could they help us fund it. They didn't help us with anything. Zero. They were non-existent. They still are today. A lot of people, I asked them, who's your assembly person at 39? They don't even know their names. Unless now you might see their lawn signs on Route 17 or Route 4 driving up and down, so you might have an idea. They're red and blue, so you kind of get who they are. But we need people in Trenton that actually know how to do the job. They understand the local, when you talk about property taxes, talking about grant funding, talking about the federal cuts, what's going on, people that know how to get a job done and actually can bring stuff back to us to help our property taxes. We all understand our property taxes are a big issue. And I really believe that we need individuals down in Trenton that have this experience. Not just down there, this one gentleman, that's our assembly person, I believe he's in maybe his 6th term, or maybe 8th term, that he's been down there, just sitting there. And they raised their salaries from, I believe, $49,000 to $82,000. Why? It's a part-time job. They don't have meetings here. They don't gather. They should have. They should, like Steve talks about. We should be having roundtables. Assembly people should be having roundtable meetings on at least a quarterly basis with the local board of ed and municipalities to let them know what's going on in Trenton. We can't operate as 2 anymore. It's not working. It's not working for any of us. So I keep going on about this. I didn't run for mayor for a 2nd term because of my family, but I jumped back into this race. I saw Steve was running for governor. We had a conversation. He said, listen, we need more people like you, mayors, council experience, that understand how to get the job done. Throw your name in the hat. I'm happy to be running with David. 2 different ends of the spectrum, but we make a really, really great team together. And I'm going to kick it over to him so he can speak a little bit more. So.
Thanks, Andrew. Really want to thank Damali for hosting tonight, obviously, and for everyone coming out. How many people are 37 here tonight? All right, we got a few, right? Oh, sorry, 39. Oh my God, I'm like, yeah, that's how many we've been. That's how many we've been going to. Anyway, my name is David Jang. I'll describe a little bit about myself. I'm an immigrant, a entrepreneur, and also a current councilman in Demarest. So my journey starts very different, in a way similar to Steve. I'm a first-generation immigrant. My parents brought me here for a better life to this country. I'm originally from China, very oppressed regime, no freedom. My parents said, you gotta come here. This is where opportunity lies. Came here, lived in Brooklyn, lived in New York for earlier part of my life. Went through a lot of discrimination, racism, all of that. But it was important to me. I kept my eyes on the goal, which is, again, to have the opportunity that we have in this country. I graduated college, Baruch City College, with an economics degree. I went to Wall Street, did my time over there. Ended up right around 9/11. Steve and I ended up at the same company. I was at Goldman Sachs doing international equity sales while he was doing domestic sales on the 50th floor. So similar time frame, but different paths. I chose after 9/11, I said, corporate America is not for me, let me do something else. I started my own business, moved back to Jersey, and basically over the past 20 plus years, grew nothing into a multi-million-dollar business and continue to strive on that front. From there, around 2019 or so, I remember it was important, really community, trying to give back to the community. And again, my parents telling me, you have to, again, take care of this opportunity that's given to you. You have to share, give and take. So I started working with the Bergen Chinese School as a board member over there to, again, share the Chinese culture as well as Chinese language to the communities around the area. From there, I got involved with the Community Chest of Bergen County, and the Community Chest, they fund other smaller organizations, nonprofit organizations, such as food pantries, shelters, and also college education programs for schools and kids that can't afford to go and get school prep. I got involved in that, and really interesting enough, Demarest is a small community, and people didn't like what was going on in the community. They didn't like the fact that the incumbents that were in place for the past decade plus were really taking the town's money and treating it as their own piggy bank. Again, they needed people to run. So what happened? They reached out to me and said, David, why don't you do this? I have no experience, just like Andrew. I have no will to really think about it. But I wanted to help my community like I promised my family. So I went ahead, door knocked, met people, sat in meetings just like this, asked our constituents, what can we do? How can we change it? How can we make it better? And with that type of activity, that type of motivation, I won, my constituents, my running mates and I, we won 3-1 off the line. And if you know off the line, column all the way on the left is where the incumbents are, and I'm somewhere all the way on the right. So to win 3-1 on that, people had to find our names, and I'm so glad for it. So now I'm 3 years into this role, and I'm up for re-election this year. And just like Steve again, I put all my chips into this when he gave me this opportunity. He said, what do you want to do? You want to take a 95% chance of winning? Or maybe do a 50-50 in District 39, because we're Republican controlled over here. And I said, you know what? You gotta be in it to win it. So here I am, doing what I need to do for a larger community. Thank you. But the important thing is we have 28 towns in our community, and it's important that we share our message. Andrew and I really care about common core issues that cater to our district. Steve cares about this whole state. We need to take care of our district first, and we're going to fight for it. So on that note, I'm going to hand it back to Damali. Thank you so much.
I know that some of you also came in after I introduced myself, so I'll just take 30 seconds to be brief about it. I am Damali Robinson. I'm running for state assembly here in District 38. Again, District 38 is around 16 different towns, including Glen Rock, Fair Lawn, all the way over to Bergenfield, and maybe over to Ordell and Moondaki and everything in between. So I am a nurse anesthetist by trade. I work full-time at Hackensack University Medical Center. I've spent 16 years in the military between being in the U.S. Army Reserves and on active duty, with my last duty station being at West Point before I came back home to be able to convert my federal service into working within my community. So I'm a lifelong public servant. I don't know any other way to be. I don't know any other way to do than to give back and to be more of a transformational leader and take some of the ideas and the conversations that we're having and find ways to implement it with doing as little harm as possible. So it is my honor to serve you here as a Board of Education trustee. This is my 5th year on the board, and you know, I look at some of the things that are going on the Board of Education and some of the things that I would love to change. And the interesting part about it was going into Board of Education, I thought that there were so many other things that I could do. Oh, okay, I could fix this, I could do this. And I realized that most of those things I wasn't actually able to impact in the way that I thought I was. And so that was an educational experience for me, and it has been an educational experience in terms of how to communicate that to the community and also present a united front as a board. Because when we are all here and we all are worried about our property taxes, we're worried about the upward mobility of our children, worried about not only once they graduate, college, what happens when they come back? Are they coming back to an area of economic opportunity? Are we able to age in place? Like, we have many senior citizens that are living here in this community, and the ability for us to just say, like, okay, when you get to a certain age, we'll just fly off and go down to Florida, that's not really happening. People aren't really able to sell their houses and know that they're going to be able to move somewhere or do better than they're doing right here. So what we need is to find a way to do better right here. And I think that having 7 years of the same leadership, and myself, I'm not financially beholden to anybody. I am beholden to the community. I work in the community, I serve in the community. I would have the same access to you that you have to me now. I don't anticipate that would change at all with state assembly. And having those kinds of conversations continuously, there's not going to be a surprise. If I were to be lucky enough and work hard enough to be able to earn your vote, I would anticipate that every 2 years, if I wanted to run again and you saw fit to elect me again, I would hope that you knew who I was, not just because you had the opportunity to hear about my name a month before or 2 months before, or all of a sudden you start receiving newsletters that you had never received before. I'm talking about continuous conversations, bilateral. So I'm telling you what I see in Trenton, you're telling me what you would like to see out of Trenton, and then we'll figure it out. And I think that that's the only way that we're able to move forward. And it's not so much of a, like right now we're in such a partisan situation where we're worried about Democrats versus Republicans, independents, and unaffiliateds are an entirely separate party in New Jersey. I mean, it's a whole strong contingent of people that do not deserve to be ignored. So we have to figure out how to center around the 90% of issues that we do agree on, and then let the 5% on either side resolve themselves in court. That has to be, like, we have to figure it out. We have to be aggressive. We are in aggressive times, and we have to respond as such. So complacency is no longer allowed. So thank you. I also want to have the opportunity, because I think not only do many of you not know what Assembly does, there are also county commissioners. And we know that we see that name thrown around, we see occasionally signs about them, but you actually don't really know what they do or what they're responsible for or what the county budget is. And we have people here that are running for a county commissioner. And I'm asking you all both to come up and just introduce yourselves. And then if you could just briefly introduce yourself, briefly tell everyone what county commissioners are and what you generally would plan to do. And then I really want to open it up for questions so that, because that's why you're here. You're here not really to hear our stories, because you could read it online, you could see it on our social media, but we want to hear from you what it is that you are looking for from us. And maybe you didn't know about us before, but you do now, and we are accessible to you. So thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm John Vitale, running for County Commissioner. Dolores Winko is running with me, and our other running mate, Chris Chung, is at another event as we speak. So we are running for County Commissioner, and a lot of people don't know what a County Commissioner even is. It used to have the title of freeholder. That might be the name that resonates with you. It's an incredibly important position, and there's no mistake why nobody knows about it. Nobody knows about it, going back to the conversation that's being had, and that has to do with the county line and how people were placed on a ballot so that when we would go in and vote right down a line, you would end up electing all these people, and then you would not know who they were, of course, years later. So we've had incumbents in office for quite some time, and really no accountability to who they are, what they're doing, where things are going. We have a $720 million budget in this county, and that's a lot of money. And our job as commissioners is partly those purse strings to how it's spent, where it goes, how it's allocated. But the best way to describe it is we're like the council to 70 towns, and your county executive would be the mayor. So you look at it as oversight to all the municipalities, working hand in hand with all the municipalities. So it's an important job. And a lot of the things that need to get done, like improvements in flood zones and roads and parks and all of that, run up from your county level down. Trenton to Hackensack to allocation to all of your municipalities, all 70 towns of Bergen County. So that is what we are running for come June 10th under the Democrats for Change banner.
So as John said, I'm Dolores Winko, I'm running with John, and I just want to say, Damali is working so hard, and she is just a fabulous person. She has a great story, and I think she would be absolutely fabulous if she were to be the representative from 38. I got that right. I canvassed with her, and she really is a fabulous person, and she definitely deserves your vote. I just want to say what John, as John said, you know, it boils down to communicating with people. I was on council in Closter for 6 years, and I never heard from the commissioners about anything. The only one I ever really heard from was Tracy Zerr, because she's involved with the food insufficiency, but they never came to Closter except for an event, like walk around Labor Day and see a few people, and we never really saw them. So I think that the trend is changing to politicians have to be accountable and have to be accessible to the people that they represent, and I don't see why that's a big deal. I find that I was on the school board for 10 years before I became a council person, and anybody who had a problem, they could call me. When I was on council, they could call me. They came to a council meeting, they talked to us. I don't see that happening now. So I think that Steve Fulop has the right idea about what we need to have happen going forward, and I hope everybody will either vote by mail, early vote, or vote in person. June 10th is the primary. Thank you for coming out tonight.
So we have a mic floating around in the back.